Okay, now it's working. Got it. Being live
Got
streamed.
it. Okay.
All right, we are streaming live. I'm just going to give this a couple minutes, make sure that this works.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited that we're live. My first time doing an interview, my first time doing this from Zoom. And so far it's working, I believe. So I am very, very, very excited to introduce you all. So first of all, hi, everybody. I am Rachel. I run this Facebook group, Nurses Who Write. I'm a nurse. I'm a coach. I love writing. I'm super inspired by stories and storytelling. And today I have a very special guest for you. This is Linde Carter. So Linde has been taking my workshop since, when did we start? March of this year.
End of March, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Linde has been playing full out in this workshop. She has had incredible growth and changes and shifts and transformations, which we are going to talk about today. But just to first introduce you all to Linde. So Linde has been an RN for 25 years. About half of that time she has spent as a hospice and palliative care nurse at the bedside, in patients' home and in long-term care facilities, and in nursing management. She is also a board certified nurse coach. And so she specializes in grief recovery, loss, and transition coaching. She has her own private coaching and doula practice, and it is called Simplicity Transitions. Linde believes that she has been called to end-of-life care from early on in her nursing career and became interested in becoming an end-of-life doula so that she could spend more time with patients and their families at their end of life than she's able to do in her clinical role as an RN. She is also very passionate about supporting other palliative care and hospice nurses and anyone who is actively involved in supporting and caring for people at end of life. And so when I first met Linde and during our first conversation, one of the things that we definitely bonded over was our fascination with end of life, with death, with spirituality, all sorts of things that happen in life to everyone eventually. And so that was one of the things that we talked about. And so I am just going to start this interview off by asking Linde if you could just introduce yourself and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, I have kind of a varied background. Nursing was a second career for me. I went to nursing school in my 30s and graduated sort of like in my mid to late 30s. Before that, I had been mainly in hospital administration, so I was in healthcare for a long time. But my career really was dance. I studied dance education, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, and I taught, but it was always kind of my side job. And then I decided to go to nursing school, I guess, to get a little bit more practical. But in doing that, I sort of ended up gradually putting all my creative stuff on the shelf. I had always been, I liked to dance. I was, was the dancer. I was well trained. I liked to sing. I was in school musicals and choirs and choruses, and I wrote poetry and short stories and everything. And little by little, with life responsibilities and being a nurse and all the demands of that can be very overwhelming, I just gradually got away from it. And so it's been sort of a circuitous route. Like Rachel had said, I've been a hospice nurse a long time. I became an end-of-life doula, so now I'm doing that on my own as well. I still work part-time as a hospice nurse to kind of pay the bills, and I haven't taught dance in quite a while, but it's been sort of a long journey, and it's interesting because in the last year or so, I was seeing all these things on Facebook about some writers groups or different programs for nurses and stuff, but it doesn't really appeal to me. They all seem kind of salesy, technical writing. You can make money doing this and this as a nurse and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, no, I want to do creative writing, And then Rachel and I both, are nurse coaches from the same program. I mean, we graduated at different times, but I came across her group, Nurses Who Write, on Facebook. So I joined it because there were a lot of familiar names and faces in there of other nurse coaches that I knew. And in the course of that, I found out about her workshop, and like she said, had that first conversation with her and thought, you know what, this is, ever since I got into coaching and trained and became a coach, and this has been a journey of discovery. So I'm gonna see what's gonna happen here. And it has been, it's been an amazing journey so far. So yeah, the workshop is just wonderful. We get to, talk about what's going on with us. We use the Artist's Way as a backdrop for the course, and morning pages, if any of you know about that. And it's really, I said in one of my comments when I did testimonial for her recently that it's really more about creative recovery. And if you don't know what creative recovery is, take the workshop, you'll find out. because it's really, and even if you don't want to like write seriously, publish or anything like that, writing is another, just one of the many art forms that can be therapeutic and healing, can heal trauma, all different kinds of things. So if you do like to write, it's just an amazing way to go about it. I mean, it's a supportive atmosphere group. We get to write every week. She gives us time writing prompts and we get to write it. And, if we want to read what we've written, and it's just been so neat to kind of see everybody, not just my own, but like everybody's growth along the way. And I've actually signed up for the next season already. So
Woohoo!
yeah,
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I particularly love the piece of your story that you used to be a dancer, because this is a story I have seen again and again in different flavors. I have actually spoken with nurses with a very similar story, used to be a dancer, used to be an artist of some sort. And I think nurses as a species, we tend to get a little bit too serious. Many of us were artistic as children, but then it's a very serious career. We hold life and death in our hands. And so sometimes we put that side of ourselves aside. We put that creative spark, that right brain part of ourselves, we put it behind us. And so I loved that piece of your story when you told me that you used to be a dancer. And so tell everyone maybe a little bit about some of the actual tangible changes that have happened in your life. And how have you been more creative recently since taking
well, I've been writing a lot more, and one of the big things is that I used to write poetry a lot, and I had everything was handwritten in these two like journal type of books. And Rachel and I had been talking about it, and she said, well, you should, dig those out. And I thought they were buried, but as it turns out, they really weren't. They were like easily accessible. So I got both of them out and I went through, and I realized that the first poem I wrote was like in 1973 or 76 or something. I think I was like 12 or 13 years old. It was horrible. It was terrible. But the last one I wrote, though, was like 1994. So it's been like, almost 3 decades since I wrote a poem. And I was like, wow, I can't even believe that's true. So I pulled a few ones out from different periods and typed them up, sort of edited them a little bit and sent them to Rachel. Said, what do you think of these? And she was like, wow, I think they're really good. I was like, okay, well, you're just being nice, but but it just sort of has inspired me to, I've written a couple of poems since then, since I've been in the workshop. And I was just saying earlier today in our session that I have a lot of things I need to do for my business and just, different things I need to write. And I do want to do memoir writing. I'm taking a workshop in the fall, one that Rachel's in right now, actually. But I keep getting drawn back to the poetry. And so that has been a big thing that, I mean, like beginning of January, if you told me like my New Year's resolutions or my goals for the year or whatever, this was not even on my radar, not even on my radar. I mean, I had talked for years about, like, you said too many times, and many people say this, like, oh, I should write a book. And when you start writing down some things that have happened to you and things you've done and stuff, you're like, well, hey, maybe I am kind of like not so boring, like you think you're nobody because we're not anybody famous or anything. And always famous people write memoirs, right? But we all have such rich lives. I mean, even if you're not a nurse, so it's just the things I've been uncovered and discovered in doing that, and doing the morning pages. And beginning, I was just sort of like just writing. And now I usually use writing prompts to kind of get going, but a lot of really rich, wonderful stuff comes out of that, and stuff that I don't even expect lots of times. So I feel like way more confident with this path and weaving writing into what I'm doing. I also teach for an end-of-life doula program. And I really enjoy doing that and putting the course together and, the writing that's involved there. And now I even very recently started putting on not that it was on that bio, but if people ask me what I do, I say, oh, I'm a nurse coach and I specialize in grief. I'm an end-of-life doula and I'm a writer. And I never used to say that.
I love
That
it.
was just like in the past few weeks, I started doing that. And the first time I tried it out on paper, like I put it down on something, I was just like, oh, wow, that's kind of,
Yeah, that's recent for me too. Now that I start telling people that I'm a writer, and it's a really cool identity to have, and obviously we can be more than one thing at once, but that's just a really cool piece of our identity. And then also looping back to what you said earlier, like that's one of the most common questions that I get from people that want to write memoir is, am I interesting enough? I worry if I'm interesting enough. And today in our workshop, we did an exercise where it's called the 100 moments exercise. And you just write as many memories as you can, in a certain amount of time. And the things that people were saying. And I was like, people are really interesting, and even myself, I realized, oh my God, there's all these things that have happened to me that I guess I didn't reflect on, or I didn't even realize were there. And so it's really, really powerful to delve into your own story and to just discover who you are. And Yeah, all of that.
What I've
So
discovered too is like, you always think about people write a memoir if they've had some kind of, bad experience, but certainly you can. I mean, to highlight that and to sort of like bring that story out for other people. But even if you've had a happy life that you haven't had a lot of those terrible things happen, you still have a lot of interesting things to say. And
yeah.
that's what I'm starting to discover, like, yeah, even within a happy life that was relatively stable, like growing up and stuff, there's still things that happen, people die and people get sick and different little disasters happen in the family that, you could write like a whole slice of life type of thing about, whether it's a story or a book or whatever. It's just amazing. I just feel like the world has kind of like opened back up, and
Yeah.
it's just wonderful. And it's interesting too, because I remember years ago, my cousin, who's since passed away, but she was a pediatric nurse. She's a little bit older than me. And she was like a nurse, like it was her whole life. She never married or anything. But she had given me a book after I graduated from nursing school, called the Art of Science and Nursing. And it was just all about not the technical stuff like our textbook, but just all about the history of nursing and all that kind of stuff. And I've always remembered that I think that's the thing that we as nurses forget, that what we do is different than medicine. And what we do, yes, it's science, but it's an art form too. I mean, the way we minister to people and the holistic approach that we take, whether you identify yourself as a holistic nurse or not, nursing is a holistic practice. And so, yeah, it keeps coming back to me now more and more about the fact that, nursing is an art as well as a science. And we need to start
100%.
remembering that more as nurses.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I've been saying this, that like, it's like nursing there's the nursing model and there's the medical model, and they are different. And the nursing model in recent years has been kind of swallowed up by the medical model. And if you look at the roots of modern nursing, which is Florence Nightingale, everyone can picture her, with her angel wings. She was holistic. That is what she preached. She talked about germ theory, about cleanliness, about spiritual care, about emotional support. She talked about all of these things, and she is the mother of modern nursing. And so nursing by definition is holistic, and part of a holistic approach is really seeing people and seeing their stories and seeing those parts of themselves, and being able to just hold space for those stories. And we carry this treasure trove of stories as nurses, beautiful stories, heartwarming stories, heartbreaking stories. And I think nurses as a group have a lot of unique blocks to sharing stories. There are a lot of memoirs by doctors. That's not uncommon for doctors to write about their practice or to write about their stories, but nurses are different. There are not a lot of stories or books out there by nurses. And so I'm curious for you, are there any blocks that you felt were unique or connected to being a nurse when it comes to sharing your story?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I have actually read several memoirs, written by doctors that I've enjoyed very much. There was one in particular written by a palliative care doctor that I couldn't put it down. It was so wonderful. And I even back then I wasn't thinking at the time that, like, me as a nurse would have the ability to do the same thing. And I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's almost like I think that separation I was talking about earlier. I just think as nurses, we just separate that creative side of ourselves. So even if we know we have the ability, we don't necessarily link it into our career and the experience that we've had. And like you said, sometimes, doctors have great stories to share, but we're there, you know what I mean? Like, we're by the bedside all those hours, and we're the one that the doctors rely on to get all that information that they don't have because they're not there. They're on call or, whatever, and they just pop in and out. And we're the ones who, for, 12 hours and plus at a time, are with the same group of people, that are caseload for that day or whatever, whether it's on the unit or doing home care, like I've done, home health and hospice and worked inpatient. And, it's really pretty much the same thing. And I think we just separate it. I think that's my biggest block, has been that I've always separated nursing from my creative side. I mean, a friend of mine I used to commute with when I was working in New York years ago, right before I was getting ready to leave that job and go to nursing school. I mean, they all knew my dance background and stuff, and she started calling me the dancing nurse. And, my friends on the train, like, all that about it and stuff. But she goes, yeah, that's like real. I mean, I guess I could have used it years later, like as a social media, handle, like the dancing nurse. But yeah, I'm in my mind, I just always separated those two things. Like, I would finish my nursing job at the end of the shift or the end of the day when I worked in the office, and then I would go off and teach dance, and I would kind of like change hats and change my personality and change, you know what I mean? Like, almost felt like I wasn't the same person. I think that's where the block it has been for me, and I think it's for a lot of nurses who are, like you said, who are really creatives at heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean,
like,
because think about how we think on the fly, like especially in home care, like nurses are so creative, like we're so resourceful and we come up with these ways to put something together in wound care or, whatever we need to do like in the moment and ask a doctor to do that. And not that there's some that aren't capable of it. I'm sure they definitely are, but I mean, I remember when my late husband had surgery and his wound was on his back wasn't healing really well. And so I was trying like all these different approaches, with wound care and stuff, because I actually love doing wound care. And so I finally came up with something that was working and it was starting to heal like that kind of from the inside out healing. And when he went for his checkup with the orthopedic doctor, I said to him, so what do you think about like, should I be doing something different with the wound and everything? He looked at me, he goes, you're a nurse, right? Home care, hospice, is that what you told me? I said, yeah. He goes, you got it covered, sweetheart. You don't need me. You know what you're doing with the wound care. He said, I don't know jack about wound care.
yeah.
I do the surgery, I put the bandage, I bandage on there, and then that's it. He said, you know what you're doing. So, and that made
Yeah.
me laugh. And I really appreciate that because, people always say orthopedic doctors are so like snotty and stuff and up and he was great. So, and he said, oh no, you got it. Don't worry. You got this covered.
Yeah. And I had a similar experience working night shift where we always had to figure stuff out on our own and be really creative. Yeah. Yeah. And if you think about nurses, like, even if you think about the way we're taught to write narrative notes, like it's so hammered into us, needs to be objective and it needs to be, it's kind of like the profession just beats the creativity out of us, like any spark or any excitement or anything like that. It's just, it's a shame. It's a shame because nursing is an art. And yeah, that's part of why I'm so excited to be bringing nurses back to our roots and back to our creative selves. And
well, I always get kudos for like my documentation. Like even recently, I do phone triage now from home for hospice, and everybody kind of approaches the notes a different way and so forth. But they were asking us, like the administration, these are the things that we need. When we had our audit, they were saying these things are missing and stuff. So I kind of wrote my notes that way anyway. So I really started beefing them up even more and so forth. And then I remember my supervisor sent out like an anonymous sort of thing that she'd taken some of the information, some of the names out and stuff for like the perfect triage note, the ideal triage note. And I'm starting reading them, go, wait a second, it's my note that I wrote.
I love it.
But I was quote like I got into the habit years ago because we were told we should do that, and a lot of people don't do it, of quoting patients. Don't just assume, say, oh, the patient said kind of like this. Just say the patient said or the family member said. And I guess because I come from a psych nursing background too, we did really detailed narrative notes in psych, like even more so than in med surg and in those other areas. So I realized like same thing, like, gosh, I've been writing all these years as a nurse and not really recognizing that's, what I've been doing.
Yeah, I had one doctor I used to work with and she was super old school. I mean, she was 95 years old, still coming to work. And she just had that.
Yeah, God bless her.
Yeah, she had that old mindset of back when medicine was more of an art, and her notes were beautiful. And I still remember one of her patient notes that started off, this patient's great grandmother came over on the Mayflower. And I was just like, oh, wow, we're going all the way back. Like, but it was, her notes were long and detailed and they were stories, and she saw the people as a whole person. And I just thought that was just so beautiful and touching. Yeah, I wanted to ask you another question. So one of the things before you came to my workshop, and when we were chatting, one of the things you were talking about was finding more focus. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, how daily writing and how delving into your story has helped you find more focus.
Well, I'm one of these people who, I kind of like want to do everything. So obviously I have varied interests and so forth. And so particularly once I became a coach and got into that, anything that came along, I was like, oh no, I want to do that. Maybe I should do this for my business. Or maybe that person's doing that and they're successful. Maybe I should do that. So I always had this long to-do list of all these things. And I was finding that like I was getting books people were recommending, I wasn't finishing them. It was just a bad habit of mine in recent years anyway, even like with novels, because I don't have time to read. I start the book and then I don't finish it, which I never used to do. I used to devour books like from start to finish. And then, or I would start some project or some thing I'm going to do, to get more clients or to sort of generate a different direction or whatever. And then I wouldn't finish that either. And so what I've found happening is that I'm learning, and I've worked with coaches the past couple of years and they're being coached who tried to get me to do this. And I'm finally learning, and I think it's coming from the writing to, sort of all those things are fine, but you have to really focus in on like one or two things and then just sort of move forward till you get those things finished or to a point where you want them to be, and then pull in one of those other things that you were thinking about and put the other, it's kind of like you have to keep like, kind of changing things out. And writing every day with the morning pages and doing some of these little exercises that we do in the session and with the writing prompts and stuff has really made me focus. And then of course, remember, we go back and we sort of remember both from our childhood and even adulthood. I mean, I'm not a youngster, so I got, some decades under my belt as far as life experience as well as work experience. And you forget all the things that, you have there. And so I think pulling those things out and then focusing like on that little story or that little fact or whatever has made me more, like this, I can have tunnel vision. It's okay. The other stuff is eventually going to get taken care of. I just have to, sort of figure out how much time I give to each thing, but not at the expense of the creative side. That's really actually very good for me. It's therapeutic. It calms me. It just helps me, work through things. That's one of the things I do in my work with grief coaching is I work with a lot of people who, with fresh grief and people who've just lost someone. I mean, I certainly have done that and will take clients like that. But a lot of times I do more work with people who have like more delayed grief or things that are from years ago, but they never really resolved because they're people like me. That's how I always dealt with grief. So I think it's kind of funny. Like even now I was realizing, with a loss that I had several years ago with my late husband, that, I did the same thing, kind of just like pushed it aside, said, I'm doing okay, and just went back to work and dove back into things and so forth. And yet that's the work I'm doing with other people and trying to encourage them to, and I find for myself, like I said, that the writing really helps to bring me back to that stuff so that stuff that I have to look at and I have to deal with so that I can, move forward in my life in a healthy way and not have this stuff jumping back up at me 5 years later, 10 years later, which is how grief has always worked for me. So.
Yeah, so powerful. And it's been my experience as well with the morning pages. They are just such a powerful tool for so many different domains. And so we were just talking a little bit about focus. And so for me, the morning pages, it's somewhere to dump those thoughts. Most of us walk around all day with to-do lists and shopping lists and just thoughts and ideas, just ping, 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 ping in our mind all day long. And the morning pages is a place to sort of just take all of that off, clear the pipes, put it down, see it in front of us. It's also a place, as you were just speaking to, for emotional processing. So a lot of times we have a lot of negative thoughts, whether it's grief or anger or even self-loathing, these thoughts, but they're not clear to us. It's not clear that those thoughts are happening until we start writing and writing and writing. And then we'll see certain thoughts over and over and over again. And that's when we're able to deal with them. You're able to bring it up to the consciousness. You're able to bring it to a place where you can face it head on and realize, for example, oh my God, that thing that I've been grieving, like that thing that happened to me 10 years ago, I'm still grieving over that. That still hurts. That's still in my consciousness. And so the morning pages are just a really powerful place to just come face to face. And so when you do the morning pages, when you do this daily stream of consciousness type of journaling, you have very, very rapid growth, things that maybe for years and years and years, you were, trying to chip away at, maybe you went to therapy, maybe you tried all sorts of different programs and modalities and tried to heal this piece of you. But the morning pages will accelerate that healing. And it's really a place for you to come face to face with your fears and your doubts, and also a place to celebrate and a place to say, hey, you know what, reflecting back, I did a great job at these things, or I have an amazing achievement. So it's just an amazing place, almost like a safe little coaching container where you get to coach yourself and you get to really get intimate with yourself and just feel safe, being with yourself and expressing yourself and getting to know yourself better, which is the key to growth. So
if you think about, like, I think about this all the time, like with physical healing versus emotional healing. I mean, doctors and nurses don't heal us. I mean, they do things that help us to heal, but even that healing comes from within our own bodies. And same thing with emotional healing. Like you said, you can have a coach, therapist, different programs and modalities that definitely help and, push you in that direction and discovering things into healing, but the healing still comes from inside. And I think that's part of, like you said, with the morning pages, you're writing down all those things that you push aside, you don't think about, they're bouncing around in your brain, but you're just like, I can't think about that right now, and move on to the next thing. And I love during our sessions for the group, when we do an exercise and then people, read what they've written, and they will have written something down. I do this too, that, they weren't expecting to come out and didn't even really realize that while you're doing that, because we usually have 15 or 20 minutes to write, that fast stream of consciousness writing. And then we read it and you can see the little aha, like they go, gosh, like, I was mostly like, oh, I can't even believe I wrote that. You know what I mean? Like, because it just comes out and you don't realize it. I mean, that's part of the thing with morning pages. You're not really supposed to read back on them. But you can sometimes to kind of like reassess and so forth. But it's kind of neat if you're writing stories or some kind of exercise like that and doing that same kind of approach with the stream of consciousness and these things that you look at and you're like, wow, that was like up here and now it's down there.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. And that's really cool about the workshop. So we do the morning pages, which is a place that you write things that it's only for you to read or for no one to read. You can burn it or throw it away. And then in the workshop, we stretch that container of safety. And so now you're writing things and you're reading it to maybe a group of 5 or 6 people. And so you're expanding your scope of what you feel comfortable, sharing your innermost thoughts. And what's really cool is when people do that, exactly what you're saying, they're surprised or almost shocked at what comes through. And then they're also have this surprise around, I sound pretty good, like I'm a pretty good writer. And that's and then that confidence builds,
the feedback from the other people say the same thing,
Yeah.
like, wow, that was great. And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, it was, like, and that constant reassurance from other people who are, walking the same path you are. So, it's genuine, and yeah. And you're kind of like surprised, like, well, hey, but actually, I guess I am, I do have something going on here that I can pay
100%.
attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah, I love it. I feel like we could go on all day talking about writing and end of life nursing. And so we have just a couple minutes left. I just wanted to ask, are there any last thoughts or anything that you really wanted to share with the group, just about your journey to becoming more creative as a nurse?
Well, I think for me, like as I started approaching this part of my life, look back on sort of like you and Rachel had just been talking about this earlier today, like, we're always waiting for to come of age or that moment to come, like when you're going to arrive, like that old adage about like my ship, when my ship came in and like, like the ship sunk or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it just like, oh, that kind of like, that's how life works. But I try to promise myself, like now that I'm moving into like the sort of like the last third of my life, that I want to make it count, like however many years I've got, whether it's, a year, 10 years, 30 years, man, I have no idea. None of us do. So I want to make that count. I don't feel like I've wasted time up until this point, but at the same time, I think I sort of like, was just thinking, oh, I still have time. I still have time. I still have time. And now I've made the realization, no, I really don't. So if I really want to do this, I just need to do it. And what's the harm? If I never publish anything, what's it going to harm? Even if I just share those stories with other people, or write them just for myself, it's going to help me. And maybe if I do, put them out there, it's going to help somebody else. And so, yeah, I want to make my life count with, with the work that I'm doing with my coaching and my end of dual life work and so forth. But this is a way to do that as well. So it just really almost kind of like fits in with my end of life, like my later in life care plan of what I want to do. So
I love it.
like I said, so it's magical. Like I said, in the beginning of this year, I just never thought this was going to be a part of my life, and this was going to be like sort of the last basically 3/4 of the year. The first quarter was kind of like, oh, what am I doing? And then ever since March, I've been doing this, and it's been amazing. So
yeah, and it's been amazing for me to watch you. I mean, to watch everyone in the group, but you're somebody who just plays full out. You show up to every session ready to go. You really I feel like you've really absorbed what I'm trying to teach with this course. You've absorbed Julia Cameron's principles about recovering our inner child, our inner artist. And it's just been really beautiful to watch your growth and your transformation. And I'm so excited for what lies ahead. I'm so excited you'll be joining us for another season.
me too.
And yeah, last but not least, I just want to thank you, first of all, for coming on and sharing
Thank you
with
for having
us.
me.
Yeah. And do you want to just let everybody know where to find you?
Yeah, I have a website and I also have a Facebook page. It's called Growing Through Grief on Facebook, which is a pretty active group. I've got, I don't know, 600 plus people in there at this point. I mean, I've had the group for about 2 years, but it grows and changes all the time. And people do a lot of input to it and stuff. And I also have a website. It's simplicitytransitions.com. Or you can, reach me via Messenger on Facebook if you're on Facebook. I have an Instagram account. I never use it, so I can't give you my little Instagram handle because I don't even know what it is. So I have no idea.
Awesome. So Facebook
and
and your Facebook group and your website. I love it. Yeah, well, that is all for today. I'm just going to double check and see if anybody has any comments. I don't see any, but if anyone has any questions or wants to hear more about the workshop or wants to hear more about what Linde does with her coaching, reach out to either of us. You know where to find us. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And for anyone watching the playback, hello. And thank
And
you
join
so
us in the next workshop. She still has a couple of spots,
I
not
do have a
many
few
though,
spots,
so
not many, but
not many, so
yeah, running out of spots. But if you
jump on
really
it quick if you want it, so.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Linde, for hopping on this live with me. I super appreciate it. All right, I'll
No
see everybody
problem.
around.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.